What makes couples therapy unique for gay men? Hey guys, Michael Pezzullo here. I'm a psychotherapist in West Hollywood. So when you go to couples therapy, most people don't know what to expect, but particularly gay men often feel like, how is our relationship structure going to work with traditional heteronormative, couples therapy paradigms, which the truth is, if you look up most popular books on couples therapy and relationships, they are going to be very straight oriented, which makes a lot of sense. But I think a lot of gay men often feel as though they're not quite seeing themselves in this type of literature. And then when they go to therapy, they're often worried that they might have a similar experience where they don't feel understood, seen, heard, that sort of a thing. So as a gay men's therapist who works with lots of couples, I want to give you a sense of a few important things that are unique to gay male relationships and what you may want to pick up on in couples therapy. So first, I think it's important to clarify what you're fighting for. So thinking about, what attracted you to your partner in the first place, when did the conflicts begin, and what do you want? What's your ideal relationship? I think a lot of gay men have been conditioned just to settle, especially if you're a little bit older and grew up in a generation where having an out and proud relationship with another man was just not even possible. So really thinking about, what do I want? What's my ideal? And then what am I fighting for? What am I looking to preserve? Are just some basic questions I would consider offer to you to consider as you begin the process overall. Next, I would think about sexual needs. Just because it's two men doesn't mean that our sexual needs are identical. One person may be more sexual or less. One of the guys may be more turned on by emotional intimacy than the other. And then, of course, there's the complexity of navigating, open relationships and non-monogamy. All of these things are perfectly fair. But again, just because it's two men does not mean that everyone's going to be on the same page and want sex in the same way. So you want to make sure that that's understood, and it's okay that all men, gay men included, have different sexual needs. And it's not just that because we're guys, we're all the same in that regard. The next I would say, and I think this is often overlooked, is really balancing masculinity and vulnerability. I think all human beings, gender aside, balance their masculine and feminine characteristics. And, in traditional straight couples, often it's more of a male-female thing. But even with two men, I think there's going to be a balance of, celebrating your femininity and your masculinity and the power dynamics that come up there. And also recognizing that men often do express our vulnerability a little differently than women, especially when navigating, masculine and feminine energy. And I find that a lot of guys don't necessarily want to talk about their feelings. They often communicate more through actions and demonstrate emotional intimacy in nonverbal ways. And that's fine. I think we've, gotten to this culture where we're often telling men that they shouldn't be themselves. So I would consider too about, how does masculinity play a role in your relationship, especially again, if it's two men who are expressing their own masculine traits, but celebrating in others. Then I would say also thinking about realistic versus narcissistic needs. And I don't mean someone who's a narcissist, but I think a lot of gay men, carry shame and old wounds from childhood, and they often are looking for some sort of narcissistic supply rather than a partner. They're looking for some, shiny, perfect object that's going to make them feel worthy because, hey, I've got this on my arm, rather than a partner who's going to see them and affirm them and challenge them. So I would really consider, and this may be something you do before you get to couples therapy, of, am I looking for a person or am I looking for an object? Because if you're looking for someone to, just validate you and boost up your self-esteem, that's going to run thin pretty quickly. A real partner, yes, of course, does validate and affirm you, but they also see you and challenge you. And they're not just there as a, commodity to make you feel better about yourself. And that can show up in gay relationships, I think, here and there, even just in subtle ways. So I would think about that as well of, am I using my partner to meet my needs, or am I using them as some sort of trophy? Then I would say another big one is rejection and sensitivity. I think a lot of gay men grew up internalizing a lot of shame, makes a lot of sense, and carry a lot of old wounds from that. And so we can often be particularly sensitive to criticism and rejection, which is tough in relationships because, healthy communication often does include critique. I would prefer if you did this, I don't like it when you do that, so on and so forth. And if you are a gay man who is really sensitive to rejection and criticism, then even, quote unquote, healthy communication may feel like an injury. And it may be difficult then for your partner to communicate just simple asks of you. And then what may happen is they just won't even bother asking and they'll get resentful and so on and so forth. So thinking about, is rejection sensitivity showing up in my relationship, is another thing I would consider, encouraging gay men to think about as they navigate their relationships. And I think lastly too, just if you think about our culture, we don't have role models. I mean, unless you're Gen Z, right? Most of us grew up with very little, representation of gay couples. And if we did, it was usually some tragic, horrible story like Brokeback Mountain, not to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it. But this idea that, two men could have a loving, committed relationship that worked is relatively new. So I think a lot of people are just sort of, making it up as they go along. I think that's okay. We're still in this phase of figuring things out as relationship paradigms have changed. I mean, we haven't even gotten fully into 10 years of marriage equality yet. So I think just normalizing and recognizing that, hey, some of this we are figuring out as we go along. We don't have hundreds and hundreds of years of, data and lived experience like heterosexual couples do to draw on to create healthy paradigms. Some of it is that we're making it up as we go along. And what I think is great about that is that we do get to make our own rules and we're not boxed in and we're not as oppressed in certain ways. But I do think it's fair to acknowledge that, hey, some of this is just like I'm doing the best I can and figuring out as I go along, and that can be okay as well. And last thing I would say too is, I always say last thing and then I keep adding things, but if you are a gay man or two gay men looking for couples work, I would really encourage you to work with someone who also is a gay man, not because someone else can't be a great ally or affirm certain things, but there are just certain nuances about our dynamics that I think only another gay man will know. They'll know the difference between Grindr and Sniffies, or, a bathhouse or a sex party, or G or K, or just little nuances like that I think are really, really important, and they're not just superfluous details. And you want to make sure that you are doing work in a space where you're being fully understood. It doesn't mean that they have to agree with everything that you're suggesting or affirm every choice that you make, but there should be a basic understanding of the culture and the vernacular. So I'd really encourage you to work with someone who understands gay men and can help you really improve upon your needs as a gay man as you enter into a relationship with someone else. So I hope this was useful. If you've gone to couples therapy and you're a gay man, I'd love to hear your experience. I'm always trying to, strengthen my knowledge set and gather ideas so that we can help one another really improve upon our relationships. The need for connection and belonging and closeness is core to all human beings. So there's nothing wrong with wanting to be in a relationship. And I think it's a great social structure that we've created. So I highly encourage folks who are looking for them to go after it and find them. And if you're in one, to fight for it if it's meaningful to you. So I hope this was useful. Let me know what you think in the comments.